You know that deeply ingrained societal script we all just sort of accept about teenagers?
Oh, yeah. The slammed bedroom doors.
Exactly. The slammed doors, sleeping until noon on a Saturday, the sudden, inexplicable bursts of anger over literally nothing.
Right.
Like
But
you ask what they want for dinner and suddenly it's World War III, and we just collectively sigh, roll our eyes, and call it teen angst.
we completely expect it. We joke about it.
We do. We practically joke about it in the carpool line. But recent pediatric data and clinical guidelines are painting a completely different picture. It turns out that this completely normal expectation we have of teenagers,
It's actually hiding a massive systemic crisis right in plain sight.
it really is. And that's exactly why you are joining us for today's deep dive. Welcome in, by the way. Our mission today is to completely dismantle those outdated myths about teen mental health.
Because society has made actual clinical adolescent depression dangerously easy to miss. We write everything off as just a phase.
Right, which actively prevents millions of kids from getting the help they desperately need. So today we are pulling from some incredible sources. We've got a clinical breakdown of 5 pervasive parent myths about teen depression, the latest screening guidelines from the American Academy of Pediatrics, and an operational overview of this amazing program called MentalSpace Scho that's operating in Georgia right now.
It's a really comprehensive look at the problem and the solution.
It is. Okay, let's unpack this. Because to fix a problem, you first have to recognize that the problem exists. And right now, as a culture, our radar is completely broken.
The broken radar definitely starts at home.
Yeah.
Which brings up the first major myth in our clinical breakdown, that classic parent refrain of, oh, they're just being moody.
Right. Just puberty doing its thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Parents assume volatility is just a feature of puberty. But the clinical reality actually lies on a very specific timeline.
Okay.
Persistent changes in energy, sleep, appetite, or interest that last for 2 or more recs are not normal teenage moodiness.
Wait, so if a kid fails a math test on Tuesday and just mopes around until Thursday, that's...
It's just life. That's normal disappointment.
But if that baseline shifts and stays there for 14 straight days, you're saying the underlying architecture of their mood has fundamentally changed.
Precisely. 2 weeks is the critical diagnostic marker. If it stretches beyond that, it really warrants immediate clinical attention. But here's the trickiest part, and honestly the reason parents miss that 2-week marker so often.
We're looking for the wrong things.
We are conditioned to look for sadness. We look for crying, for isolation, for the classic melancholic presentation of depression that we see in adults.
Yeah.
But in adolescence, depression frequently presents as irritability and anger.
I really want to pause on that because I think that is the biggest blind spot for most parents. I read this analogy once that a teenager's brain is basically like a computer running an advanced massive software update on a really old battery.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. When their system gets completely overwhelmed by sadness or anxiety, the brain just panics. And instead of processing that complex grief, it defaults to the absolute easiest, most primal, defensive emotion it can express, which is anger.
It's a defense mechanism, plain and simple. The adolescent brain doesn't always have the executive function to articulate, I'm feeling a profound sense of hopelessness.
So they just lash out at their sibling instead.
Exactly. Or they snap at their teacher. Mistaking a teenager's irritability for a bad attitude when they are actually depressed is like...
It's like putting a piece of black tape over your car's check engine light and assuming the car is fixed.
Yes, you end up punishing the symptom instead of treating the disease, which means the kid just feels even more isolated.
Wow. Okay, but what about the kids who aren't slamming doors? What about the kids who are doing everything right?
Yeah.
One of the most fascinating things in the research is this idea of the perfect student.
Oh yeah, high achievers.
Yeah. Society basically tells us that if a kid is pulling straight A's and leading the debate team, they are thriving.
What's fascinating here is that this is perhaps the most insidious myth of all. Myth number 5. The idea that good grades equal mental well-being.
Because they're just masking it, right?
High-achieving teens frequently mask their depression behind relentless perfectionism. Being outwardly productive absolutely does not equal being internally well.
Right.
In fact, for many of these students, the anxiety of maintaining that perfect image is exactly what is driving their depression in the first place.
That makes so much psychological sense, though. The dopamine hit of academic praise basically becomes a survival mechanism.
Exactly.
They feel completely empty or chaotic on the inside, so they cling to that 4.0 GPA because it's the only thing giving them a sense of control.
Or value. And as adults, we completely validate it. We see the straight A's and we think, oh, parenting win.
Yeah, we reward the very behavior that is acting as a smokescreen for their distress.
We do. When parents and schools equate academic performance with mental well-being, they lose their ability to see the very real symptoms hiding right behind that report card. They just don't see the sleep deprivation or the panic attacks before exams.
Or the quiet despair. So if we agree that parents are often missing the signs, either because the depression is disguised as a bad attitude or it's masked by a pristine transcript, it makes you wonder what happens to the kids who just slip through the cracks.
Yeah.
Like, why is there still so much hesitation around just getting a kid evaluated?
Well, the hesitation is largely driven by the belief that a teenager will simply snap out of it as they get older.
Oh, myth number 2.
Right. It's just a phase mentality.
Yeah.
But the clinical data shows that untreated adolescent depression does not just fade away, it actively metastasizes.
Metastasizes. That's a strong word.
It's accurate, though.
Hmm.
It significantly raises the risk for substance use and suicide in the short term. But looking at the long term, there is a staggering statistic that completely shifted my perspective.
Lay it on me.
Roughly 70% of untreated teen depression cases recur in adulthood as major depressive disorder.
Wait, 70%?
70%.
That totally reframes how we look at adult depression. I mean, we treat major depressive disorder like an adult disease, something that hits you in your 30s or 40s due to stress or like life events.
Right.
But you're saying that for a massive majority of people, it's actually a pediatric disease that we just ignored for 2 decades.
That is precisely what the data suggest. The foundation of chronic adult mental illness is often poured in middle school and high school, which really makes the societal resistance to therapy even more tragic.
Because of myth number 3.
Yes, the idea that therapy makes it real or makes it worse. A lot of parents fear that acknowledging the depression or sending their kid to a therapist gives it power.
Which is completely backward.
Entirely backward. Naming it is what takes its power away.
Evidence-based therapies, specifically cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, and interpersonal psychotherapy for adolescents, known as IPTA, are incredibly effective.
The numbers on that were wild. Massive 50 to 70% remission rates. They actively reduce the risk of suicide and give adolescents the emotional scaffolding they need to survive.
Okay, I completely agree with the efficacy of therapy for teenagers, but I have to be honest, when I was reading through the clinical notes, I saw that these evidence-based psychotherapies are validated for kids as young as 8 years old. That's myth number 4, that they're too young.
Right.
But wait, age 8? Isn't an 8-year-old a little too young to be sitting on a couch doing deep psychoanalysis? My first thought was immediately a second grader sitting on a Freudian leather couch talking about their mother.
It's a very common reaction. But it relies on an outdated Hollywood caricature of what therapy looks like.
Yeah.
Evidence-based therapy for an 8-year-old looks nothing like adult talk therapy.
Oh, really?
It is highly structured, very interactive, and developmentally appropriate. We are not asking an 8-year-old to untangle their subconscious.
So what does it actually look like in the room then?
It looks like teaching practical coping skills. A therapist might use a feeling thermometer to help a child physically draw where anger lives in their body.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they teach them how to identify cognitive distortions, like realizing that a negative thought is just a passing cloud, not a concrete fact. It involves role-playing, emotional regulation games, and heavily involving the parents so the home environment reinforces those skills.
That is brilliant. It's essentially giving a child a user manual for their own brain before puberty even hits. You're teaching them how to process stress before the stakes get incredibly high in high school.
Precisely. And the reason this is so vital is that the earlier you intervene and teach those skills, the less likely that child is to become part of that 70% statistic of adults suffering from major depressive disorder.
You are fundamentally changing the trajectory of their adult life.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's look at the systemic reality of this. We know the signs are incredibly hard for parents to decode. We know therapy works, even for young kids.
Right.
If parents can't reliably catch it, the next line of defense has to be the medical system. But having been to a pediatrician recently, I know those visits are absolute chaos.
You've hit on the exact clinical bottleneck. The American Academy of Pediatrics officially recommends routine depression screening for all adolescents aged 12 and older.
Which sounds great on paper.
That's the gold standard of care.
Yeah.
But the reality of modern medicine makes executing that standard incredibly difficult.
Right, because you get, what, a 15-minute well-child visit?
If you're lucky.
And in those 15 minutes, the doctor has to check spinal alignment for scoliosis, administer vaccines, talk about screen time, discuss nutrition, and answer whatever random questions the parent brought in. Where does a nuanced psychological evaluation fit into that?
It usually doesn't, which leads to chronic underscreening. But pediatricians are trained to look for a very specific clue that signals underlying distress.
What's the clue?
Teens often present to the doctor with somatic or physical complaints. They will come in complaining of chronic, unexplained stomach aches or constant tension headaches.
Or extreme, unshakable fatigue. And let me guess, the doctor runs the blood panels, they do the physical workup, and there is absolutely no medical cause.
Nothing.
The physical pain the kid is feeling is entirely real, but the root cause is psychological distress manifesting in the body.
Exactly. The body is sounding the alarm because the mind can't. So how does a time-strapped pediatrician handle that realization when they have 3 other patients waiting in the hallway?
They can't just launch into a 45-minute therapy session.
No, they can't. The medical community has realized they have to bypass the 15-minute time crunch altogether. The solution emerging right now is to shift the initial screening to the family at a low-friction moment, completely outside the exam room.
I saw this in the materials. Providers are now distributing a free digital screener link directly in the after-visit summaries.
Yes.
The link doctors are utilizing is cheattherapy.com mental health tests. And what's fascinating is the tool they are using on that site.
The PHQA.
Right. The PHQA, which is the adolescent version of the standard PHQ-9 depression screener, validated for kids ages 11 and up.
And the brilliance of the PHQA isn't just its clinical validity, it's the sheer lack of friction. It takes a teenager about 5 minutes to complete on a smartphone.
That's nothing.
It's scored instantly, providing a clear severity metric from minimal to severe. And crucially, it is entirely private. A teenager doesn't even need to enter an email address to start the assessment.
Which is massive. Teenagers are incredibly protective of their digital footprint. If you ask them to create an account and input their email just to take a mental health quiz, they're going to close the tab immediately.
Without a doubt.
By removing that barrier, they can sit in the privacy of their own bedroom, answer a few questions honestly, and see the results for themselves. It gives the teenager agency over their own mental health.
It does. It functions exactly like a baseline diagnostic. Here's where it gets really interesting. It's like taking a thermometer reading.
Yes. Taking your blood pressure at the pharmacy kiosk or using a thermometer, that thermometer doesn't tell you exactly what virus you have, but it immediately validates that you have a fever and need a doctor.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's so clever. It tells you your baseline is in the red zone and you need to consult a professional. By putting that link, hhtherapy.com, for mental health tests on the discharge paperwork, pediatricians are empowering families to take that baseline diagnostic exactly when they are ready to process it.
Without the pressure of a doctor hovering over them.
Right.
Okay, so let's play this out. A teenager takes the PHQA screener in their room. The results come back indicating severe depressive symptoms. They show their parents. The family agrees, we need to get help. We've successfully caught the hidden symptoms.
Step 1 complete.
But what happens next? Because anyone who has actually tried to navigate the modern mental health care system knows that getting a diagnosis is only half the battle.
It's a huge hurdle.
Finding a therapist who specializes in adolescence, who has actual openings, and who takes your specific health insurance is a bureaucratic nightmare. You spend hours on hold, leaving voicemails that never get returned, only to be put on a 6-month waiting list.
You're absolutely right. The gap between a 5-minute screening and an actual therapy session is a massive chasm where thousands of kids just drop out of the system. And that brings us to the operational model we wanted to highlight today.
MentalSpace Scho.
MentalSpace Scho. This is a K-12 mental health support system designed specifically for schools in Georgia, and it serves as a brilliant blueprint for how we can fundamentally fix this broken pipeline.
Because they are bringing the clinic directly to the student.
Exactly. Their entire model is built on eliminating the friction you just described. First and foremost, MentalSpace Scho offers same-day teletherapy.
Same day. That is honestly unheard of.
It is.
In a traditional outpatient setting, you're lucky to get an intake appointment in 3 weeks.
It changes the entire paradigm of care. When a student is in crisis, or when a family finally musters the courage to ask for help, you cannot tell them to wait until October.
No.
MentalSpace achieves this by providing dedicated, licensed therapist teams for each specific school they partner with. And these providers are deliberately diverse and culturally competent, which is incredibly important.
Totally. A teenager needs to feel safe and understood by someone who can actually relate to their lived experience and cultural context.
Absolutely.
And let's talk about the logistics of telehealth in a school because it's so smart. So what does this all mean? By integrating this into the school day, you are completely eliminating the two biggest hurdles for working class families, which are cost and transportation.
Yes.
You don't have to pull your kid out of school at 2 p.m., leave your own job, drive 45 minutes across town in traffic, sit in a waiting room, and then drive back. The student just goes to a private designated room in the school, opens a laptop, and have their session.
It removes the logistical burden entirely. And you mentioned cost, which is the ultimate barrier. MentalSpace School accepts all the major commercial insurances in Georgia, like BCBS, Cigna, Aetna, Humana, all of those.
Okay, great.
But the absolute game changer, the piece of this model that creates true equity, is that they accept Medicaid. And for those Medicaid patients, the therapy is $0 out of pocket.
Wow. That is profound. You are removing the agonizing choice a parent has to make between paying for groceries that week and paying a $50 copay for their child's therapy.
Exactly.
You're offering $0 Medicaid therapy in the one building where the child already spends 35 hours a week. It's a phenomenal equalization of healthcare.
It really is. And they don't just stop at individual student therapy. Their model recognizes that a student does not exist in a vacuum. A child's mental health is deeply intertwined with the adults around them.
So true.
So MentalSpace provides a comprehensive suite of services that includes crisis intervention, suicide and violence prevention, family counseling, and crucially, staff wellness programs.
I love that they include the teachers and staff, because if the teachers are completely burnt out and the home environment is highly stressed, giving a student 1 hour of individual therapy a week is like bailing water out of a leaky boat with a teaspoon.
Right.
You have to patch the boat. You have to treat the entire ecosystem.
Precisely. And the data proves that this holistic ecosystem-wide approach works. The outcomes in the source material are remarkable. Schools utilizing this model reported an 89% improvement in student attendance,
That's huge.
a 92% reduction in reported anxiety, and an 85% family satisfaction rate.
Think about that attendance metric for a second. 89% improved attendance. That proves right there that chronic school absenteeism isn't just about kids wanting to play video games or skip math class.
No, not at all.
It is so often a direct symptom of untreated mental health struggles. When you treat the anxiety, the student actually shows up to class.
It's a direct correlation. And the entire system is built to seamlessly integrate with the school's legal framework. They coordinate directly with school counselors and pediatricians. They maintain strict IPA and FERPA compliance for privacy.
Which is critical.
And for the Georgia district specifically, this program ensures they meet the state's HB 268 mental health compliance requirements well ahead of the July 2026 deadline.
It's just a remarkably efficient system. For any families or educators listening in Georgia who want to look at initiating this process, they actually make the intake very straightforward. You can go to mentalspaceschool.com or reach out directly to MentalSpace School at chictherapy.com for family intake.
It's a model I truly hope we see replicated across the entire country.
Yeah.
It is the blueprint for modern pediatric mental health care.
Yeah.
We have to meet the kids where they are when they need it.
We really have covered some fascinating ground today. We started by debunking that toxic, deeply ingrained myth of teen angst, realizing that what looks like a slammed door or relentless academic perfectionism might actually be a desperate cry for help from a brain that is just overwhelmed. Yeah.
We explored how shifting a simple 5-minute digital screener into the hands of the family can bypass the chaos of a 15-minute pediatrician visit. And finally, we saw how systemic blueprints, like MentalSpace School, are taking those screening results and turning them into immediate, zero-barrier treatment that heals not just the student, but the entire community around them.
It's a lot to process, but it all connects back to that one staggering statistic we discussed earlier. And this raises an important question, something I'd really encourage everyone to think about as they go through the rest of their week.
I know exactly the stat you mean.
Yeah. We established that roughly 70% of untreated teen depression cases recur in adulthood. If that is true, how many of the adults we interact with every single day, our coworkers, our spouses, our friends, maybe even ourselves, are secretly still fighting an unrecognized, untreated battle that actually began decades ago in their middle school hallways?
Wow.
That completely reorients how you look at the people around you, doesn't it? It gives you a lot more grace for the adults in your life, knowing they might be carrying a childhood weight they never learned to put down. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking questions, keep looking beneath the surface, and remember, if you see the signs in the teenagers in your life, don't write it off as a phase. We'll catch you next time.